Premier Doug Ford hosted a virtual housing summit with municipal leaders in the last day or so. Ford says his goal is to come up with ways to allow more families to buy a home. The Premier says the government is cutting red tape by investing more than $45 million in a streamlined development approvals fund. Let's see what impact this may have at all with Ben Rabidoux, the president of Edge Realty Analytics. Ben, great to have you back here on the program. The proposal put forward by the Premier here, what kind of a dent do you think this is going to make on the issue of affordability in housing?
Well, I think you need to frame it in the context of just the magnitude of undersupply right now that we're seeing in the resale market, right? So if we look at homes for sale at the end of December in Toronto, there were only about 3,200 homes for sale. Now that's down about 6,000, down 60% from last year at this time, and it's down about 75% since the start of the pandemic. So we're just so incredibly short on housing inventory right now. These sorts of policies will certainly help at the margins, but it's going to take a long time before we see any sort of balance in the market.
Ben, is time really the only thing that is limiting our ability to increase the supply here? I mean, you can put all the policies in place you want, but building homes, building townhouses, condos, etc., it all takes time to add the supply in.
Well, it does take time, and I think that what we're starting to see is a recognition from politicians, both provincially and federally, that there is somewhat of a pinch point in the delivery of new homes at the municipal level. And so anything that we can do to incentivize municipalities to fast track that development is going to be welcome news for the housing market.
Ben, what about just the idea of taking existing homes and maybe converting them into sort of duplexes, triplexes, things along those lines? How sort of open do you see governments being to this idea to perhaps sort of open up the ability for people to get into houses in cities in particular at this time when it's so tough to sort of buy into the market?
Yeah, anything that we can do to add density, to add new supply is going to be welcome because it is, look, what we're facing right now in Toronto is absolutely a crisis. We just do not have enough homes relative to the level of demand. And so, any sort of policy that aims to both curb some of the unwanted excesses on the demand side as well as incentivize new supply, whether that's brand new developments or whether that's the conversion of existing units into multiple dwellings. All of those things help at the margin, but it's just important to emphasize that there's no silver bullet here, and what we're looking at are a basket of policies that hopefully move the needle over time.
Ben, you talk about the City of Toronto being in a crisis. Do you see that as a crisis that's broader than the City of Toronto, extending out 905? And if so, how far do you see it? Are we talking sort of beyond Hamilton, edging into Niagara, into the Dufferin area? Like, where does this crisis kind of end in your analysis?
Well, it is a crisis right across the country. I want to be clear. I mean, there's almost no metro that I look at that isn't seeing a dramatic drop in inventory and a very strong sales demand. As it relates to Ontario specifically, every major metro in the province is seeing inventory down at least 50% compared to last year and down by at least 2/3 compared to the start of the pandemic. So it's an inventory story right across the province. And when you start to look at house prices, I mean, the numbers start to get just silly. I mean, we saw the typical home in Toronto increased in value by about $290,000 in the past year. Right now, if that's your principal resident, that's tax-free. So in order to earn as much as your house earned last year, you would have to make about $550,000 of pre-tax income.
Right.
This is a crisis, and this is something that's not just a Toronto story. This is right across the province, and for the most part, right across the country.
Yeah, our houses really are learning money. Of course, it's all paper at this time, but Ben Rabidoux, president of Edge Realty Analytics, really appreciate the time and insight this morning. Great to chat with you again.
My pleasure.